Howdy, 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 howdy. So, this is my second video. My second video in what do I want to call it? My spiritual journey, my faith journey, my exploration into the divine, and where I've come from and where I'm going. Okay. My first video, I talked quite a bit about systems of thought and the way in which, over time, we develop our own systems of thought in our own life, and how over a great length of time, systems of thought are developed politically, religiously, theologically. People love to understand the world, and they understand the world by creating categories, by creating systems, by creating ways to interact with the world which makes sense to them. And they can do that through asking questions and seeking answers, and that's basically what I'm doing as well, right? But some of that over time gets solidified, right? So an idea might start kind of a little loose, and then like, I don't know, let's say democracy, right? Kind of starts as this abstract concept that, hey, there's this thing called democracy, and it's kind of like everybody gets their own kind of free choice in the sense of politicals, or in such of politics, that politically speaking, we can kind of all contribute and have our own vote, and some people can be representatives, and we're not quite sure how this is all going to work out, and then a group of people get together and say, hey, let's try it out in this country and see how it works. And so America's born, and they, instead of being under a monarch rule, or even a monarch with some kind of senate or some kind of representational government, they go, let's just get rid of the monarch and just have a representational government, and we can elect people. And so, well, who should we elect, and how does it all work? And so they have to hash out all these rules, and then over 250 years, or well, how long has it been? 220 something years, 230 years, however long it's been. We've been hashing it out, what it means to be a democracy, what it means to have voting rights, what it means to, and it's kind of getting more and more solidified, right? Kind of more and more defined, more and more regulated, more and more kind of boxed in, almost kind of, turned into a nice solid chunk of democracy and history, and this is what it is, and we can really bite our teeth, sink our teeth into it now, right? And maybe that will hold true for a while, and then, but that's taken hundreds of years, right? So in this video, what I want to do is I want to look at kind of the evolution of religious ideas and my faith journey, and I want to look at two specifics, right? So first one I want to look at, this guy here, Satan. And the reason I want to look at this guy is because he's got a troubled past. He's got a bit of a history to him, right? So I've been, over the last year and a couple months, I've been studying the book of Job. And this is kind of really what brought this up, is the way in which I always understood Satan. My background, Christian background, kind of conservative fundamentalist. Satan was a bad guy. He was an evil dude. Like, there was no good in him. He was just a bad, rotten egg. And his desire was to destroy humanity. His desire was to unleash his demons on the world and just completely annihilate the world, right? And annihilate all of humans. He hated humans. He hated God. He hated everything good, and he just wanted evil to exist. And so he just puts evil into everybody's heart, and he's the source of all evil, right? So, I'm gonna leave a little bit of room here because I don't want to write something else down here in a minute. So Satan equals evil. Well, so I'm reading the book of Job, and there's a little bit of this sense there, right? Kind of a little bit of this sense. And Satan comes to God. God's up in heaven. Satan comes along, and God's like, hey man, what you been up to? Satan's like, well, been down on earth, kind of just perusing, browsing, just kind of checking out what's going on down there. And God's like, oh, cool. See anything interesting? He's like, not really. He's like, God's like, well, what about my guy Job there? What do you think about that guy? Satan's like, yeah, he's got a good life though. You've blessed him. He's got a good life. You take the good away from his life, and he's not going to be so responsive to you. He's going to just like kind of sell you out real quick. And God's like, all right, go ahead, do it. Go down there, take all his good stuff away, you know? So Satan's like, all right, cool. Watch, I'll show you. So he goes down there and destroys his flocks and kills off his kids and takes all of his riches and just devastates him, right? Devastates him. And a little bit later, Job's just kind of like, what the heck, man? What did I do? You know? And so a little bit later, Satan's back up in heaven, and God's like, yeah, see my guy Job down there? Didn't sell me out, did he? He's a good guy. And Satan's like, yeah, well, I mean, come on. He's still got his health, right? You know, I mean, take his health away, and he's gonna sell you out real quick. He's gonna be like, no, I hate you. You're the worst ever. And God's like, all right, tell you what, you can't kill him, but you can go down there and just really mess him up. I mean, give him all the nasties. So Satan goes down there and gives him all the nasties. That's the end of the story between Satan and God. We're like, come on, leave us hanging like that, right? You know, leave us hanging, great. So, so here's Job down there. Everything's wiped out. Everything's destroyed. He's sick as a dog. He's off in the dumps, like crying his eyes out and just being like bemoaning himself, like life sucks, life sucks, life sucks. I can't believe this happened to me. Kind of whole mentality. But he never sells out God. He never sins. He never just like, you know, does that one thing that pisses God off. And we look at that story and I think, okay, what's this relationship here between Satan and God? What's going on there? Well, first of all, why is Satan hanging out in heaven? I thought he'd been expelled. I thought he'd been kicked out, right? No, that's not the case. So what's going on in this story? And I'm going to get back to this idea of evil in just a minute. But now, the book of Job is written Old Testament times, Old Testament times, you know. And nobody knows exactly when it was written. Then people do some word searches on it, and they do some kind of contextualizing, and they kind of try to pin it down into at least within like a couple 100-year bracket, or maybe a century bracket, or a millennial bracket, you know. And they're like, okay, was it before the fall of the kingdom, after the fall? And so they do all this, and then the telling thing is this idea of Satan. See, at this point in this story, if you just look at the story and don't bring any baggage to it, Satan is operating just like an agent of God. He is doing his job. Another word for Satan that often is used is the accuser. 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 I think I spelled that right. Well, you can spell check me if you want. The accuser, right? It's his job. He has an official job given to him by God, and he reports to God in heaven. And his job is to go down there and accuse people. Now, this is a little bit different. This isn't like what we think of today in our modern understanding of somebody accusing somebody else, right? This is more like there's a little bit of that legal aspect to it, where he's kind of the prosecutor, you know, and there's also a little bit of that whole, he's also the police kind of, in the sense of entrapment. So his job is to go down there and try to trip people up. Maybe the tripper is better than the accuser. So he's down there trying to tempt people and trying to kind of undermine people, and he's down there making sure people are doing their job, doing the thing they're supposed to do in their relationship with God. They're you know, and that's what he does, right? This whole idea of him being evil doesn't really exist in this case. See, this whole idea of him being evil works its way into Judaism centuries later, millenniums later, right? This isn't until, like, when this story takes place, it's a little vague about when it takes place, but from the ideas portrayed in this story of Job, Satan isn't a force of evil. Satan is doing his job. The idea that Satan is a force of evil comes in from outside of Judaism, from other religions. As the Jews go out into their being dispersed, their diaspora, and as they come back, they bring these religious ideas with them. And this is where I want to go with this. They bring these religious ideas with them, which have influenced this idea of Satan. And so from for 1,000 years, why there were 500 years while they're out in exile and they come back, and up to leading up to the time of Jesus, this idea of Satan changes. It evolves. It's interesting, you know, if you really do a study on this idea. And now all of a sudden, Satan equals evil. But you see, in the Old Testament, Satan didn't equal evil. Evil was a completely different force. Now, in Job, if you're reading Job, and this is interesting, there's these two creatures, the Leviathan and the Behemoth. And if you look at these two creatures, we like to say, oh, one's a hippopotamus and one's a crocodile. Well, there are some slight descriptions that definitely work that direction, you know, if you really want to read it that way, but it's not real, like, exactly matched up evil, you know, even that they're describing a crocodile or hippopotamus. What they're describing are forces of evil, and it plays into the story so well. There are these forces of evil that exist apart from God and apart from Satan and apart from that whole domain that God has to deal with and keep at bay and fight in battle. And these are the Leviathan and the Behemoth. They are just these massive forces of evil that God has to go down and battle, right? And that's where the evil lurks. And that's what makes Job make sense. And if you don't have that understanding at the end of Job, God shows up and says, hey, look, man, Job, you're a good guy. You did the right thing. You didn't call me out. You didn't sell me out. You didn't turn your back on me like and I'm going to reward you. And he gave him back all of his wealth plus more, right? And by his friends who kept saying, Job, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, he said, you guys are the ones who don't understand what's going on. You're the ones who don't get it. You know, I'm out here fighting these forces of evil day in and day out. And that's where I'm occupying my time. And that's my job. Your job is not to call me out. That's not your job. So anyways, that's a whole thing. So, but this idea has evolved over time. And now what we want to do here in the 21st century, we want to go back and read the Old Testament stories, and we want to take those thousands of years of history of this evolution of this idea of who Satan is, right? And cast it back into the Old Testament and say, oh, well, the serpent in the Garden of Eden was Satan. Oh, the Satan mentioned in Job, he's just a force of evil trying to do away with Job. And so we want to read, instead of saying, no, our idea of Satan has changed over time. Because as soon as you say our idea of Satan has changed over time, then all of a sudden that challenges things, right? It challenges like, well, is it the right idea of Satan or is it the wrong idea of Satan? But if we can say, no, this is who Satan is, and he's defined, and he is evil, and he's bad, and every instance we see in the Bible of Satan is evil and bad, and he's got this horde of demons, it's like, okay, those are ideas that exist outside of Judaism, and in some respects exist outside of Christianity, and have infiltrated in to the idea of Christianity. And so this idea has evolved and changed over time, right? And here's another one. I'm going to get back to this, but let me talk about this other one. And then we're going to tie it all together here. The afterlife. Now, this is another one. So in the Old Testament again, now these are completely Christian understanding, right? Because that's my background, that's where I came from. There's not much of a sense of the afterlife in the Old Testament. And there's not really much of a sense of the afterlife in the New Testament, you know. There is a little bit, you know, but right now we think there is this place called heaven and this place called hell, and the good guys go here and the bad guys go here, the believers go here and the non-believers go there, and yada, 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 and we've got it all sorted out, we've got it all figured out, and we're telling God how to do it, right? God, this is what it is. Yeah, right. But in the Old Testament, when you die, you just kind of go to this murky place in the ground. It's kind of like this shadowy, unknown world that you may or may be stuck in the dirt, or you just may not exist anymore. It's kind of unknown, right? And so there's not this developed idea of the afterlife. But again, as the Jews, as Israel was captured and taken off to Babylonia, and they existed there for a while and came back, and as they went out into the world and came back, they brought these religious ideas with them. And one of them was a more thought out and profound afterlife. And for some time there was like different levels of heaven, and sometimes there was different ways of existing and different levels of hell, or there was no hell, there was, and so now if you're like Catholic, there's like heaven and purgatory and hell, which makes a little bit of sense because when you die, you're supposed to be judged. So, I mean, does that happen right away? Or you wait around for a while? But at the same time, there's this idea that there's going to be a resurrection and we're going to have a new body and a new earth. And so, when does that happen? And are we in heaven until then? Or do we exist somewhere else? And then, what about if you have some sin in your life when you die? Well, then you need to go to purgatory and work it off. And if you're really bad and you've never been baptized or you've never accepted Jesus as your Savior, then you're going to go to hell. But well, maybe if you're a good enough guy, can you go to purgatory instead and then have a chance to repent? Or, and so there's all this, and this is where it goes back to that system of thought. Theologians have worked all this out over 2,000 years worth of history until we get to today, and they're like, well, this is what it means, and this is it's like, this is, what you have to believe. It's all closed up. We've got it all locked up. And it's like, well, okay, you're looking at 3,000 years worth of history of thought leading up to today. And what about people 1,000 years ago who believe something a little bit different? Does that mean they didn't have it locked up? What about people 2,000 years ago who didn't have it? Did they not have it all locked up? Were they wrong about something? It has changed. It has evolved. It has developed over time. As we've thought about it, we humans have thought about it, And this next video I'm going to do is about, going to be about the history of the Bible and the history of the Christian church, okay? And this is where big picture stuff, right? So, and the reason I bring that up now is because our ideas, Christian ideas and the understanding of the Bible have changed as well. And when you start to talk in those terms that things have changed over time, people become very uncomfortable with that. And as you look at, we're going to color Satan red, okay? Because he's supposed to be a big bad guy, right? So we're going to put some red up here for this guy, big bad guy. Now, I think where I'm at right now, I believe in Satan. I believe he exists, okay? And I believe, now I don't know if there is a being out there called Satan. I believe it is a force that challenges us. It's a force that brings in doubt and skepticism, a force that brings in temptation, a force that brings in things that are going to draw us away from the path we want to go on, the path we need to go on, the path that we're called to go on. So I think that over time, we can be taken away from this path, right? But it's more like a coach who is trying to strengthen us. So we have an opportunity, we have a recourse to go back and redo these things. Not necessarily in the afterlife, but maybe so. Maybe there's this idea of reincarnation or a new beginning or something, right? So, but we have this idea that if we trip up and if we screw up and if we mess up and if we commit a wrong or a sin or something like that of that nature, we have an opportunity to correct it. We have an opportunity to learn from that and to move on. And that's what my spiritual journey is about learning from these things and moving on and growing. And so when I've studied these things, the Satan and the afterlife, I was challenged because what I believed now was not necessarily what has been believed in the past, nor is it something that will necessarily be believed in the future. It is what was believed now. And that doesn't necessarily make it true. It doesn't just because people believe it now doesn't necessarily mean that that is the end all be all of that thing. It means it's where it is now. It can change. And if it can change, then it can be wrong or right or just different. And I think thinking about spiritual I think thinking about spiritual things as right or wrong is not a good way to look at things. It's just not a good way to look at things. Because then we say, oh, that line of thinking is wrong. Okay, no. Is that line of thinking bringing us to fruition? Is it bringing us to enlightenment? Is it bringing us to a greater understanding? Is it bringing us to the divine? Or is it leading us down a path that's going to be a dead end, not go anywhere? And maybe we need to walk that path for a time and to figure that out. And then come back and say, okay, you know what? That didn't work out. Let me try this other path. And then we walk down this one. And for me, that's okay. That's what the spiritual journey is about. You know, if we're not reaching all these dead ends and backtracking and finding another way, then we're not growing. We're stagnant. And we don't want to be stagnant. We want to continue to grow and flourish and prosper and have a good life. And so when I look at these two things, when I look at the afterlife and the evolution of this thought, it challenged me. And when I was in school, when I was in college, I started studying philosophy, and I started studying the history history of the Christianity. And what I really discovered in the history of Christianity was that there was not this, I had this understanding, I think, and probably maybe this was my fault, that 2,000 years ago, Jesus came. He sat down with his disciples and he said, this is what's up. This is the end all be all of what's up. Don't stray from this. And then he left, right? And the disciples got together and said, okay, this is it. And what I was taught in my church was exactly what Jesus taught his disciples. But that's not true at all, not even close to true. Now, we have the Bible, which gives us some information about what Jesus taught. Was that everything he taught? No. Was that some of what he taught? Yes. Was some of it not what he taught? Probably. There's probably stuff that have creeped into those writings, because it took 100 years for those writings to develop. Think about it. 100 years is a long time for other thoughts to creep in and other sayings to be attributed to Jesus. So is it 100% authentic? I don't know. I'm okay with not knowing, because I don't take it. For me, it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be like set in stone. This is exactly what happened in that time and exactly what Jesus said. It doesn't need to be that way for me. And I'll get into that later. But where we stand now, where I stand now, being challenged in these thoughts, I was like blown away. Like, hey, wait a minute. So you're saying that these ideas evolved over time? So then what I'm believing now, first of all, may not be right. And second of all, it can change. It can become something different. So something my great-grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren believe might be completely different than what I was believed, right? And we need to be okay with that, because it's the truth. It's the way it's going to be. And I know people are going to make exceptions of this and say, well, wait a minute, Dave, you can't, that's not faith. Faith has to be a solid thing. Faith, believing in something, right? Faith is in here, not out here. So, like, if I believe the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl, which they just did, it has nothing to do with the Rams. It has to do with my faith. It has to do with me. So, and that's kind of where it's at. So when we have this idea of faith and our own spiritual lives, what we're really talking about is what's in here, not what's out there, right? And what I have faith in, what I believe in to be true. Now, if that thing is true in the sense of being, what's the word I want to use? Existing within of itself as a truth, like it's a little bubble of truth right there, and it has always existed and will always exist in that state of truth. See, I don't believe that. I believe it has evolved. And I don't believe I am believing in something that has always been this way. So my way of thinking about stuff is that we need to be able to change and evolve with the times. And that's why I'm totally fine with like science, because science is the exploration of the unknown and coming to an understanding of what's out there and what's not out there. And that doesn't challenge my faith. Matter of fact, it helps to inform it, because now when I think of God, I'm not thinking of some old white guy sitting on a throne in heaven, like Zeus or something, like pissed off at the world. I'm thinking about a force, an energy, a spirit a living, active force that is available and to the world, a creative energy that is there, helping us, with us, working with us, the Holy Spirit, a creative force that is there present with us. Not some abstract idea of something existing far away that is removed from us. No, it is here now. It is of us. It is part of us, and we are part of it. We exist within it, and it exists within us. And we can attach, we can participate in the spiritual, in the Spirit, in God. We can participate physically, actually, and that takes time and practice and talent, and not talent, time and practice and patience to be able to do that, But I could come to that understanding because I was able to let go of these ideas that were handed down to me and I was raised with, and maybe misraised with. Maybe I'm misremembering, maybe my understanding was faulty, and now my understanding is different and new and changing, and now I understand that there is this awesome force that is available to us to tap into, to be a part of, that can help guide us and move us in the directions we need to go. And then there's this other force that is trying to operate against that, kind of a counteraction. For every force there's an equal and opposite force, right? Reaction. So this is working together to bring us to the place where we need to go. So that's kind of where I'm at with this whole thing. And people will say, Dave, that doesn't sound very Christian. You're right. It doesn't sound very Christian. In the sense which I have in the past understood Christianity, and people are like, well, what about Jesus? What about Christ? Well, we're going to get into that in the next video about what that means and kind of how that plays out in my own life. So I'm going to, I think I'm going to do a little rattle can on this one. I haven't done rattle can in a while. I've been working on these other ones over there, and I just haven't really got into them too much. So I think I'm going to hit this one with a little rattle can. So it's been enjoyable talking about this stuff, and I hope it's making sense. I think the big point is I want you to understand that our faith can't be just given to us. Okay, our spirituality can't just be given to us. It has to be something we come to an understanding to of our own. And if what you've been given and what you understand isn't working for you, then you need to find a different way or a new way. And I told Heather this. Heather's my wife, and she's a medium and spiritual advisor, and she's really helped me quite a bit too. Just seeing things in a different way, because she definitely comes at things in a different way than I do, and seeing what she says and does, trying to understand that in the same context in which I operate sometimes is a bit of a challenge, and but we make it work. And one of the things I said to her is, I said, understanding old things in a new way. And that's what I really think we have to do. Christianity is 2,000 years old. Judaism is 4,000 years old, right? And so we have these ties that tie us into this long history, but that history has changed and evolved over time, and we need to change and evolve with it. And certainly if you plucked a Christian up from 500 years ago and dropped them into a church in America today, they wouldn't understand it at all. It would be completely foreign and completely just like heretical to them. They'd be like, what are you doing? And this is not of God. You guys are all going to hell. And it would be just, same like if you picked up a Christian from today and dropped them back 2,000 years in Jesus' time, they'd be like, wait a minute, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Because we live in a different culture. We live in a different time. We live in a different history, with different society. We live in different thoughts and different understandings, and we need to include those things in our own spiritual life. And it's okay to do that. It's good to do that. It's right to do that. That's what we have to do. Okay, see if we can do this here. Let's see, what else we need? We need to pick another color here. Let's do some of this one here. This is a good color. Ooh, I don't know if it's gonna work or not. Oh yeah, it'll work. I had one that the nozzle clogged on, I went to scrub it and it just kind of dribbled out all over me. Gotta clean my nozzle in that one. Probably also need to open my window. Ooh. Yeah, gonna need to open the window. Well, let's see, what else does it need? Should I do a stencil on it? What do you think? Bit of a stencil? Let's see, what's it going to do? This one works. Alright. Let's try this one. Told you I haven't done this in a while. It's kind of fun. Uh-oh, we're clogged again. That's alright. We get clogged up. So, next video, I'm going to talk about kind of my understanding of the Bible and how that plays into my life and my own spirituality and my understanding of church history and Christianity in general, kind of where it's come from and where it's going. And I hope this is making sense. If you have any questions, just leave a comment and subscribe. And yeah, enjoy my other work. So thanks for joining me.